Over the past few days, I've read a lot of information about two young men who would seem to have very little in common with each other. One was raised in California and the other was in Texas. But, unfortunately, they have a great deal in common. Both of them were 13 and they both killed themselves. Asher Brown and Seth Wash suffered the same set of circumstances at their high school, in that they were constantly being picked upon. And why? Well, the bullying was a result of their comrades and their fellow students believing that they were gay. And the stress and anxiety got too much for both of them. One hung himself and the other shot himself at the age of 13. As a result, a couple of people decided to create a channel on YouTube called It Gets Better. And the purpose of the channel is to invite people throughout the country and the world to give information about how they were able to overcome what may have been similar circumstances when they were in school. Now granted, I'm 43 years old. It's been a very long time since I was in high school, and I admit a lot must have changed in the meantime. One thing that hasn't changed, however, I'm sure, is bullying. I attended high school with 2,000 students, 500 of which were my graduating class. And throughout the entire 4 years, I was the smallest individual in class. And I got ridiculed because of it. I got ridiculed because of the way I looked, the way I talked, the way I dressed, the way I walked. Going to school, for me, on many days, was a nightmare. If I was lucky, I was in one of the larger classes throughout the school in which there were 35 to 40 other students, and I could kind of blend into the background. But in some of the smaller classes, in which there may have only been 12 or 13 other students, it was a living hell for the entire semester. But the whole point to this video is to try to encourage anyone who might still be in school suffering the same set of circumstances as these two young men, and help them realize that life isn't always going to be like this. That hopefully, as you get older and approach graduation, things will change. They did for me, and they have for many people. The nice thing about graduating from high school is that you get the opportunity to start making decisions for yourself that up until that point have been made on your behalf by other people. Where you live, where you go to school, what classes you take, when you take your lunch hour, how you get back and forth to school, all of those decisions are made for you either by your parents or the school administrators or teachers, and you have very little option in your own decision-making process. All of that changes once you leave the setting of school. Whether you decide to go to college or join the workforce, it suddenly opens up a whole new world for you in terms of choosing where you work, where you go to school, who you choose to hang around with, and all those influences that negatively impacted your life while you were in school are easily avoided most of the time. Now, I'm not trying to wave some magic wand and say that as an adult you never face conflict, because that's unrealistic. But as you get older and you are able to choose your own environment and your own setting and your own friends, it's much easier to navigate your way through all of those people who, let's face it, are jerks. So if you're in school and you're watching this video or any of the other hundreds of videos that are being posted to this website, you're probably asking yourself, well, that's just great. You mean I have to wait until I get out of high school before I can start avoiding all of these negative influences? Well, to some extent, maybe, but there's some things that you can do to kind of improve your life in the here and now. Really, there's two main things that I would recommend, because it kind of helped me. The first is try not to isolate yourself completely. I know that when you are faced with a set of circumstances where you can't walk through the halls of your own school without being harassed and picked upon and intimidated, it seems like the entire world is against you. But very rarely is that the case. You only start to feel like that when you totally withdraw from every single person in your life, and you're left with really no one to befriend. And if that is the case, where you're pulling away from everybody, then the feelings of helplessness and hopelessness can seem a little overwhelming. So all it takes is one good friend or one family member to try to help you overcome some of that constant harassment that you may be facing. And the second thing is, I would recommend try to avoid dining on ashes. And what I mean when I say that is, if you are already feeling like you're being overwhelmed by being picked on and harassed and intimidated, the last thing that you want to do is a common mistake that people like me make every day. And that is where you're constantly replaying the day's events in your head. It's almost like a movie that you're replaying over and over and over again. The only difference is every time you think about what happened during the day, you seem to catastrophize it and it gets a little worse. Well, that's certainly not going to make you feel any better. It's easy to say, it's a little harder to do, but if you can just avoid fixating and obsessing on all the bad things that have happened during the day, it kind of makes it a little easier to avoid all those negative feelings. I hope it helps. You know, I know that if I were having the opportunity to have this conversation with my 17-year-old self, I probably would kind of wonder whether or not any of these things were going to help me feel better about myself as I try to finish up my high school years. And you just have to have faith that it will work, that you're not alone, that there are a lot of people who have been exactly where you have been, and we all survived, unlike the two young men who chose to kill themselves as a result of these terrible things that were happening to them. Those two young men will never have the opportunity to see that life can get so much better. So before you become overwhelmed by what's happening to you at school, speak to someone. Speak to someone that you trust. And give yourself a break. And recognize the fact that your life doesn't have to be as miserable as what some of the people around you are trying to make you feel. Good luck.